Hi, I'm Lauren Hayes. Have you ever looked into your sister's eyes while your face was bleeding, your shoulders screaming out of its socket, and heard her whisper, "You should have signed the mortgage"? That was me on the cold concrete of my parents' garage, tasting iron, my vision swimming, and all because I refused to be their guarantor. I remember the slam of my father's hand against my cheek, the crack of my body hitting the wall, the way the air left my lungs in one violent rush. My knees buckled, my palms slipped in my own blood. Still, I crawled. Out of that garage, across the frost-bitten yard, up the porch steps to my mother's door. I pounded, sobbing, begging her to help me. What happened next? I'll never forget. Even the police were horrified. 2 weeks before that night in the garage, Melissa called me out of the blue. Her voice was honey-sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "Hey, Laur, we're having a little dinner at Mom and Dad's this Friday. Just us, you know. Cozy. Dad's even cooking." I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for Melissa to invite me to something that ended up being more of an ambush. But she kept pressing, adding that it's been too long and Dad misses you. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, the house smelled faintly of roasted chicken and lemon cleaner. The dining room table was set with Mom's best china, the kind she only used for Christmas or when she wanted to impress someone. Melissa greeted me at the door with an overly tight hug. "You look tired," she said, her perfume clinging to my hair. Behind her, my father, Richard Hayes, sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. His expression was unreadable. I hung my coat and joined them, forcing a polite smile. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Mom ladled soup into our bowls. Melissa chatted about her renovations. Tyler, her husband, bragged about some business deal I knew was already falling apart. Then Dad reached under his chair and slid a thick manila envelope across the table toward me. "Open it," he said. I froze. "What's this?" Melissa leaned in, elbows on the table, her smile tight. "We're closing on the house soon, but the bank's being ridiculous. They just need a little extra assurance." "Assurance?" I repeated. Dad nodded. "Your name. On the mortgage. Just as a guarantor. It's no big deal, Lauren." The words hit me like a slow punch. I worked in finance. I knew exactly what was inside that envelope: balloon payments, variable interest rates, clauses that could sink me if they defaulted. "You've been denied before, haven't you?" I asked quietly. Melissa's smile faltered. "Temporary credit issues. Freelance income looks bad on paper, you know." Dad's eyes hardened. "That's why we need you. You've always been the responsible one." It wasn't a compliment. It was a command. I set my spoon down. "I can't just sign something like this. If anything goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," Melissa cut in. "You think we'd let that happen to you? We're family." The word family sat heavy between us, a net they kept casting, hoping I'd tangle myself in it again. I didn't take the bait. "I'll think about it," I said. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Not then. I finished my soup without tasting it, the envelope still sitting between us like a loaded weapon. The next morning, I found myself at Kelly's kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. She'd been my best friend since freshman year of college, the one person who could read my face like an open book. "They want you to do what?" she asked, folding her arms. I stared into the steam curling from my mug. "Co-sign the mortgage, just to get them through closing." Even to my own ears, it sounded like I was defending them. Kelly's eyes narrowed. "Lauren, no. If you sign that, you'll be on the hook for every cent when they can't pay. And trust me, they won't pay. They're my family," I said quietly. "No," she said, leaning forward. "They're counting on you thinking that way. You've always been the one who shows up. That's why they keep asking. Because you're predictable." The word stung, mostly because it was true. I tried to smile, to wave it off, but her gaze pinned me in place. "Do you remember the credit card mess 3 years ago? When they accidentally used your account for Tyler's business expenses, and you paid it off because you didn't want Mom and Dad to be embarrassed?" My throat tightened. That was different. "It's never different," Kelly said flatly. "It's the same story, over and over. They create the mess, you clean it up." I looked away. my eyes tracing the familiar pattern of her kitchen tiles. The truth was hard to swallow. I just don't want to lose them, I whispered. Kelly's voice softened. You need to ask yourself what you're losing by keeping them. Her words sank into me like cold water. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. Lauren, you have to draw the line somewhere. Because if you don't, there's no limit to how far they'll push. I nodded, but I didn't promise anything. When I left her house, the winter air bit at my cheeks. In my car, the smell of coffee clung to my sweater, a reminder of her warning. I wanted to believe she was overreacting, but deep down, I knew she wasn't. 2 nights later, I walked into my parents' dining room and knew immediately this wasn't just a family meal. The table was set like something out of a magazine. Mom's silverware polished to a mirror shine, her lace tablecloth perfectly pressed. A roast chicken sat in the center, its skin crisp and golden. Melissa was already seated beside Tyler, both of them glowing with that smug, almost homeowner's energy. Dad sat at the head of the table, knife and fork resting neatly on either side of his plate. Mom moved between the kitchen and dining room, smiling the way she did when company was over, except the only company tonight was me. Lauren, Mom said, brushing a non-existent crumb from my shoulder. You're just on time. It's 6 o'clock exactly, I replied, slipping into the chair they'd clearly reserved for me right between Melissa and Dad. Dinner began with polite small talk. Melissa's latest fabric swatches, Tyler's big break in business, Mom's new church committee. But as soon as the plates were half empty, Dad leaned back, swirling the ice in his glass. So, he said, fixing me with that measured gaze I'd known my whole life. Melissa tells me you haven't signed yet. I set my fork down. I'm still considering it. Tyler chuckled under his breath. Considering? It's just a signature, Lauren. You don't even have your own family to worry about. Why not help your sister start hers? The words landed like a slap, though his tone stayed light, almost teasing. Mom nodded in agreement, as if Tyler's point was reasonable. Families help each other, she said, smiling sweetly. I swallowed the sharp reply building in my throat. It's a big financial commitment. I just want to be careful. Dad's smile thinned. Careful or stingy? Melissa let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head as if I'd just said something ridiculous. The air thickened. Forks scraped against plates. My hands tightened in my lap. You've always thought you were better than the rest of us, Dad said, his voice low now, like a warning. You work with numbers, so you think you see every angle, but life isn't a spreadsheet. I'm not better than anyone, I said evenly. I just know what's at stake if things go wrong. Dad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. We finished dinner in strained silence. I kept my eyes on my plate, counting the minutes until I could leave. As I stood to take my coat, Dad's voice followed me. You'll come by later this week. We'll talk privately. It wasn't a request. And despite every instinct screaming at me to say no, I heard myself answer, fine. Dad called me that Friday afternoon. No hello, no small talk. Swing by the house after work. We need to settle this. Every muscle in my body told me to say no, but years of conditioning of showing up when he demanded it made my mouth say, all right. By the time I pulled into their driveway, the winter sun had sunk behind the trees, leaving the yard in a bruised gray light. The garage door was open just enough for me to duck under. The air inside was sharp with the smell of motor oil and cold metal. Dad stood near his workbench, a half-empty tumbler in hand. Melissa leaned against the doorway that led into the house, her arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Lauren, Dad said, gesturing toward the stool across from him. Sit. I stayed standing. You wanted to talk? He set the glass down with a clink that echoed in the concrete space. This is ridiculous. You're making your sister's life harder over nothing. One signature. That's all. It's not nothing, I said quietly. It's a legally binding contract that could ruin me. Melissa's laugh was soft, almost pitying. You're being dramatic. Dad took a step forward, his boots loud against the floor. I'm your father. I've provided for you your whole life. The least you can do is step up when I ask. I'm not saying no to hurt you, I said. I'm saying no because it's dangerous. His face hardened. Dangerous? What's dangerous is a daughter who turns her back on her family. The air seemed to press in around me. I took a step back, my shoulder brushing the cold steel of the garage wall. Dad's voice dropped into that low, dangerous register I'd feared since I was a child. You think you're too good for us? Sitting in your fancy office, acting like you're above the people who made you? That's not what this is. He moved fast. One shove and my back slammed into the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder, white hot, stealing my breath. Dad, stop. The punch came so quickly I barely saw it. A flash of his arm, the sharp crack across my cheekbone, the taste of iron flooding my mouth. I crumpled, my knees hitting the concrete hard. My hand slipped in something warm blood, I realized, dripping from my nose. Melissa didn't move to help. She just tilted her head and said, almost gently, "You should have signed the mortgage." Her words cut deeper than the hit. I tried to push myself up, but the pain in my shoulder was blinding now. A deep, nauseating throb. Dad stood over me, chest heaving. "You're going to regret this." I met his eyes, refusing to look away. "I already do." For a second, I thought he might hit me again. Instead, he turned and walked toward the doorway, brushing past Melissa without a glance. Melissa crouched down, her perfume thick and cloying. "You're making a mistake you can't take back, Lauren." Then she stood, following him inside, the door shutting with a final, heavy click. The garage was suddenly silent except for my ragged breathing. I don't know how long I lay there, cheek pressed to the cold floor, the world narrowing to the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. My fingers were numb, my vision blurry. Finally, I forced myself to move. Every shift sent knives of pain through my shoulder, but I managed to crawl toward the open garage door. The night air hit me like ice, stinging my split lip. I made it across the driveway, through the brittle grass of the yard, and up the steps to the front porch. My hand shook as I pounded on the door. "Mom, it's me!" My voice cracked. "Please, I need help." Inside, I heard muffled voices. My mother's and my father's, low and firm. "Please, Mom," I sobbed, my forehead resting against the doorframe. "I'm hurt. I just need you to open the door." The voices stopped. The house went still. I knocked again, weaker this time. "Don't leave me out here." Nothing. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the welcome mat, the one that read "Family First" in cheerful cursive. Blood from my lips spotted the fabric. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Snow began to drift in the cold air, dusting my hair, melting against my hot skin. That was how Mrs. Thompson found me crumpled on the porch, half conscious, bleeding. "Oh my God, Lauren, what happened?" She was already pulling out her phone. "Stay with me. I'm calling 911. The last thing I remember before the sirens was the slam of the front door not opening to let me in, but closing tighter, shutting me out for good. The sirens grew louder until blue and red lights flashed across the snow. 2 EMTs knelt beside me, their voices calm but urgent. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" "What happened?" "My shoulder." I winced as one of them gently touched it. "Looks dislocated," he said to his partner. "We'll stabilize it." They wrapped me in a blanket, lifting me carefully onto a stretcher. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I barely noticed. What I noticed was the house behind me, the dark windows, the closed curtains. Not once did my parents come out. A police officer crouched beside me as they loaded me into the ambulance. "You're safe now. We'll take care of you." Safe. The word felt foreign. At the hospital, a doctor reset my shoulder, stitched my lip, and ordered scans for possible fractures. Lying in that stark white room, I kept replaying the garage dad's fist, Melissa's smirk, the sound of the door shutting. When I was discharged the next day, my phone lit up with dozens of missed calls and texts. None were from my parents, none from Dad, none from Mom. But my sister? Oh, she'd been busy. Kelly's name popped up on my screen. "Before you see it somewhere else, I need to show you something." She sent me a link to Melissa's private Facebook post, private but not private enough. There I was, on the garage floor, face streaked with blood, eyes glazed. The clip was short, grainy, and deliberately cropped. The caption read, "Please keep my sister in your prayers." She's been struggling and had an episode last night. We did everything we could to calm her down. An episode. My stomach turned. They'd taken my pain and twisted it into a performance, painting me as unstable. And knowing Melissa, she'd already fed that story to half the family, if not the entire neighborhood. I called Kelly. She's making me look dangerous, like I did this to myself. Kelly didn't mince words. She's controlling the narrative, and you're letting her. What am I supposed to do? I asked. Go online and argue? That'll just make me look worse. Her voice was steady. No. You gather proof. This isn't family drama anymore, it's assault, and now it's defamation. Press charges. The thought made my chest tighten. My own father. My own sister. But then I thought about the blanket over my shoulders in the ambulance, the one the EMTs had given me because strangers cared more than my own blood. Maybe Kelly was right. That night, after Kelly's call, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The cursor blinked on a blank folder. I typed one word into the name field. Evidence. For a long time, I just stared at it, my pulse in my ears. This was more than just saving files, it was crossing a line I'd never dared to cross with my family. The first thing I uploaded was the ER report from the hospital. Diagnosis. Dislocated left shoulder. Blunt force trauma to the face. Split lip. Physician's note. Injuries consistent with physical assault. Could not be self-inflicted. Then came the photographs. I'd taken them that morning, my hand shaking as I held the phone. Bruises blooming purple across my jaw, swelling under my eye. The angry red welt on my shoulder where Dad had grabbed me. I saved each one carefully, labeling them by date and time. Next, I opened my messages. Every text from Melissa, every missed call, every group chat where she or Mom had hinted I was unstable, went into the folder. Then I pulled up the Facebook video. Even cropped and edited, it was damning in its own way, proof they had filmed me without consent while I was injured. Kelly came by later with something that made my hands go cold. Footage from Mrs. Thompson's security camera. The black and white video showed the garage from across the street. There was Dad, storming out, Melissa following close behind. Neither looked back. Moments later, I crawled into view, dragging my arm, blood visible even in the grainy image. Kelly set her phone down. This is enough to start. I swallowed hard. Start what? Holding them accountable. The idea felt impossible. I'd spent my whole life absorbing the blows, not just physical ones, to keep the family intact. Filing a case against them felt like shattering the last piece of that fragile image. I thought about Mom's voice behind the door, the choice she'd made to leave me out in the snow. I thought about Dad's fist. I thought about Melissa's smile as she called me dramatic. And then I realized, the family I was protecting didn't exist. Not for me. By midnight, the folder was filled. Medical records, photos of injuries, text messages, the Facebook video, Mrs. Thompson's footage. I backed it all up to a flash drive and slipped it into my desk drawer. When I finally closed my laptop, the house was quiet. No ringing phone, no footsteps in the hall, just me and the knowledge that the next move was mine. The thought scared me, but it also steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't cleaning up their mess. I was building my own case. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and coffee, sterile, detached from the mess that had brought us all here. Dad sat at the defendant's table in a crisp suit, his jaw clenched. Melissa was beside him, scrolling on her phone like this was a tedious errand. Mom sat in the back row, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed anywhere but on me. My attorney stood, holding up the flash drive. Your Honor, this contains security footage from a neighbor's camera, medical records, and social media posts made by the defendants. The judge nodded. Proceed. The screen lit up with Mrs. Thompson's video. The grainy, black and white footage showed me crawling from the garage, arm limp, blood smeared across my face. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the hospital report, the photographs, the Facebook post. Each piece landed like a hammer, shattering the narrative Melissa had spun. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was steady. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to stand in front of strangers and talk about what my own father did to me. But when your family closes the door on you literally, you realize you have two choices. Keep bleeding for them, or stop. Dad glared at me, but I didn't look away. I'm done bleeding, I said. The judge reviewed the evidence in silence before delivering the ruling. Dad was guilty of assault, Melissa guilty of defamation. A restraining order was granted. When it was over, I walked out into the crisp winter air. Mom didn't follow. Neither did Melissa. Kelly was waiting by the courthouse steps, holding a paper cup of coffee. You did it. I let out a breath. I felt like I'd been holding for years. Yeah. I did. For the first time, I realized that family wasn't the house you were born into. It was the door you chose to walk through. And I was walking through a new one.